So the first presentations will be related to two strategic cities, Tabarka and Kef, and a collaboration between three researchers will present tales of marginalized community heritage in North Africa. So the three researchers are Dr. Asma Gharbi, a lecturer at INO, the Tunisian National Architectural School. She's an architect and researcher, and she has a PhD in built morphology, and her work focuses on morphological regeneration in new marginalized contexts. And Mr. Majdi Faleh, غني عن التعريف, assistant professor at the University of Bahrain. He received an Aga Khan postdoctorate fellowship at MIT and is a Fulbright scholar. Majdi is involved in several research projects in Australia and taught at the University of Western Australia, University of Melbourne, University of Deakin, and Chinese universities. Also, we have Dr. Nourchen bin Fatma. She's also a lecturer and she has a PhD from University of Carthage. Research focused on tectonics, architectural education, critical regionalization in Tunisian architecture. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Leila. So in our presentation on both cities, Nourchen will start, is divided into three parts, where Nourchen will start the first part. Nourchen, are you here? I hope we're not experiencing any technical issues. Nourchen, can you unmute yourself? So I'm just going to...
Okay.
They're saying...
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Leila, for the great presentation. Well, before I start, I really want to say that we are really delighted to be involved in this conference. And to be involved in this conference. And thank you, Professor Gamal, and all members, speakers, and the audience of Engage Network. Well, our talk is entitled Tabarka and Kef, Tales of Marginalized Community Heritage in Tunisia Northwest. Tunisia is a country with a strategic location. This had enabled it to host several civilizations and to harbor considerable cultural wealth and historical interbreeding. Despite this richness, this research argues that the state has not considered historical and cultural diversity, an economic milestone and engine of territorial promotion, especially in the Northwest region, where there is a high rate of unemployment and poverty. So in this presentation, we will focus on Al-Kef and Tabarka, which benefit from their direct connection with the Tunisian-Algerian border and constitute the two chief towns of their respective governorates. However, the two towns are considered as a marginalized territory whose heritage is weakened and threatened by disappearance. By way of this presentation, we will demonstrate that facts. The two towns are fundamentally characterized by a richness of their natural settings. The next slides, Majdi, please. This presentation, the two towns are fundamentally characterized by a richness of their natural settings, which contain mountain, forests, and water resources, such as the sea in Tabarka and the Thames in Al-Kef. Their natural wealth has enabled these two cities to be the cradle of several civilizations who left both tangible and intangible heritage. The human manifestations found in Al-Kef reveal a richness in historical intervals which reflect various human layers, such as Numidian, Roman, Byzantine, and Arabic. It reveals also many classified and unclassified historic goods. On the other hand, the genesis of Tabarka city is closely correlated with this crossbreeding between Berber and Genoese communities than Italian and French. The historical layers are visible through a lot. Please, Majdi, the presentation.
All right, I'm moving to the next slide, yes.
In the other hand, The genesis of Tabarka city is closely correlated with this crossbreeding between Berber and Genovese community, then Italian and French. The historical layers are visible through a lot of historical monuments such as the Genoese fort, the colonial neoclassical architecture style, etc. Well, both cities are also rich by cultural potential, which manifests itself in arts, culinary heritage, local know-how, etc. Today, El Kef is known as the cradle of the theatrical and popular arts. For its part, Tabarka federates itself in the image of seaside tourism. The state is trying to promote these two cities, mainly through cultural events such as the Jazz Festival in both cities. Frankly, we will need more from the government than its tinkering here and there to promote these cities. Therefore, it is legitimate to ask this question. What about the current situation of heritage, mainly the tangible ones, such as monuments and buildings? To answer the research question, we relied on three techniques. First of all, we used the territorial diagnostic based on SWOT analysis. These techniques allow us to identify the assets, opportunities, problems, and the limits of the territory. We also used a content analysis technique, which is used to understand the legislative text by identifying their orientation, strategic choices, weakness, and actions. Finally, we employed different types of interviews that highlighted different point of view, the population, expectation, needs, lack of knowledge, etc. In the next slide, we can see, in Majdi, the slides, please. In the next slide, we can see, for example, an extract of some interview. Yeah, here. One of the interviewed person said that, for example, here, he's an historian and active citizen. He said that it's absolutely necessary that you are aware of the current programs concerning the heritage of El Kef, including a lot of strategy. Another citizen of El Kef said that there is no strategy, no program, no effort to meet the needs of any intervention. Even the ISM is hardly exist anymore. The citizen, a part of a few, and are totally absent. Worried about the actual situation. Please, the slides, Majdi.
Yes.
Well, worried about the actual situation. Now, to develop the results of this research, I give the floor to my colleague Majdi, then to Asma. Go. The floor is yours, Majdi. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nourchen. So this project, which is led by our colleague Asma Gharbi, is focusing on both cities, trying to do diagnosis of the current situation based on the methods Nourchen mentioned, semi-structured interviews, territorial diagnosis, and also observations on the ground. And for those who are familiar with the term, territorial diagnosis is inventory on a given territory. So it's a SWOT analysis that most of you, I believe, familiar with, listing problems, strengths, weaknesses, economic, social, ecological issues in a given context, taking into account diversity of stakeholders who's involved in that process. So it offers an explanation of the evolution of a given city or given urban context or given natural context, the past evolution, assessment for the future one. So in this slide, as you can see, the diagnosis showed us that there is a new urbanization. It's not new urbanism, but it's new urbanization that is affecting both cities. There are no clear boundaries within the master plan, invasion of forests, mountains, farmlands, and coastlines. Another recurrent problem is overlap of landscape urban architecture scale. So there is a blurred blurred territories. In fact, one is overwhelming the other, and that weakens the natural context that is this region of Northwest Tunisia is known for. There is another problem which you can see on the slides: urban sprawl in towns and historic centers, and that leads to problems of historic centers. So when there is an urban sprawl in towns and historical centers are affected, there is a loss of local identity. There is a neglect at times from the citizens, given that they live in that context of loss, that context of marginalization around them. And lastly, there is abandonment and control, densification, and unreflected squat. So these are problems I will discuss, I will elaborate on next slides. So primarily we have two issues in this diagnosis, territorial diagnosis we looked at. There is a decrease of cityscape attractiveness. The image of the city is disfigured. There is devaluation of historical perimeter and its perception by the public. So we have a problem on physical problem on the ground affecting these two cities of Northwest Tunisia. And as you know, especially our Tunisian guests, Northwest Tunisia was largely marginalized by the political regime in Tunisia and the several political regimes, basically. So now moving on, as we can observe from these photos, a landscape identity is confused with the new urbanization limits. There is an absence of architectural unity. As you can see, there is an absence of coherence within that landscape. There is an absence of the pattern, the typology, morphology of existing building or of existing historical buildings. There is a lack of architectural coherence overall, and we can observe that in El Kaf on the right-hand side and Tabarka as well, where buildings are moving or horizontally and vertically on the ground. So another issue is overlap and fusion of the urban architectural landscape scales, and that leads to a certain extent in Tabarka and El Kaf to weakened heritage. Heritage becomes fragile by the type of land use, the type of usage within that heritage perimeter. There is trivialization of its historical cultural value, potential contribution development of local attractiveness in the construction of regional identity. So there is a weakened heritage due to these factors. Urban architectural landscape scales are moving not necessarily hand in hand, but are overlapping, are sometimes confusing and confused, etc. And as you might know from the history of Tabarka, there are, of course, twin cities, similar landscapes. On the left-hand side, you observe a city or an island in Italy. So two similar landscapes, they both reflect social appreciation or appropriation of social governance that changed. So originally these people migrated. So this city of Tabarka has migrants that come from parts of Italy. But when we south of Sardinia on the left-hand side, when we observe this Calazzetta and this municipality of about 2,900 inhabitants, they have similar shared histories of migration. We observe that there is more harmony in the way this urban fabric is included or is inserted into the landscape, unlike in the case on the right-hand side of Tabarka, where there is a housing or developments, horizontal, vertical, etc. There is a lack of cohesion in this context. In the case of El Kaf, we observe it here in the slides. There is urban decay, continuous urban decay, spontaneous squat by small shops. We see them on the corners here and there, some properties for sale, small shops that do not necessarily take into consideration the existing historical fabric of the Medina, the old fabric of the Medina. So there is an unreflected, uncontrolled occupation with these shops, with these new businesses, etc. There is a lack of coordination, I'd say. Going ahead with the case of Tabarka as well, there is the same phenomena of urban decay, spontaneous squat, unreflected, more so in the case of Tabarka, unreflected, uncontrolled developments vertically. So many, due to COVID-19, many owners, and we gathered this from some of our interviews, they sold their properties due to the crisis. But there is, in the past decades, continued vertical densification that does not necessarily take into consideration the traditional fabric of the region. The sloped roofs, as you can see in this image on the left-hand side, sloped roof with orange tiles, which is very typical of the region of Nourchen and Tabarka. So at times there are attempts, at times there is a loss of that architecture coherence, those proportions, vocabulary. So again, moving forward, in terms of our diagnosis, we looked at, or we gathered some thoughts and reflections based on interviews. So the results from these interviews demonstrated that 80%, as you can see in this diagram, of citizens, 80% of citizens only know historical centers, HC, which you can see here. And 20% know the context, 20% know the larger context of historical sites outside the, let's say, the old Noyau, or the old center of the Medina of Kef, for instance. So only 20% had the knowledge of the other historical sites and how they're affected, etc. Based on our interviews as well, we gathered reports on tangible heritage state and launched programs, and we noticed that the problems are higher than the efforts made. So in terms of state role, probably 50%, almost 50% state that it remains a problem. Degradation of the heritage or the historical fabric remains a problem as well. In terms of infrastructure, the efforts remain a problem. The efforts of city councils, the efforts of government-led initiatives. In terms of programs, it remains a problem. There are not enough programs to renovate, to create a coherence within the urban fabric, both in these northwestern cities. So we also examined legislative texts or law texts based on the current situation. We noticed that those regions, the master plans, are marked by an underuse of cultural and natural heritage. They have heritage that is very rich, as Nourchen mentioned in her presentation. It has a value, humanitarian value, a local value, it can attract businesses, tourism, increase income for local population. It can help create a brand image as a factor of local development, but unfortunately, it remains underused. So based on legislative text, we noticed that some of them are still being used from 1970s, 1990s, and they haven't been updated to the legislative text related to heritage management of the region. I'll finish with this slide and hand it over to Asma. So the issues, collective consciousness. On the left-hand side, you have social issues, denial of identity, lack of knowledge from local population of the perimeter of the what's outside their Medina or their old city. There is ignorance of historical cultural values. On the right-hand side, you have the problem of governance. So governance, GOV, strategic issues where there are limited choices, non-updated legislations on the ground, text and actions applicability are, I'd say, loose. So choices not updated in relation to new needs and expectations. Now, in terms of strategic issues, we have supervision management, we have financial technical orientations, and then, for example, the need to open up to new funding, donors, new NGOs like GIZ, etc., to increase that collaboration on heritage, on the existing, not only urban heritage, but also natural heritage. Priorities, identification, strict policy with respect to urban regulations is needed. Updating the current urban regulations to promote architectural identity in Kef and Tabarka is also an important technical orientation. You can see that in this diagram. So you have the political ideologies. For example, there is a case of the Gharbi synagogue, the Jewish temple in El Kef, a project that has been delayed for forever under different political regimes, leaders. And the reason or the argument was it might lead to renovating that might lead to increase in terrorism in the region, which is not necessarily it's not a convincing reason. So there is a lack of political will, or there are other ideologies behind it. So financial orientations, there are efforts on the ground. So the German JZ working on Tabarka 2050, the vision for Tabarka 2050, private investments as well. And then technical orientation, there is unfortunately lack or a local know-how is lacking on the ground, local know-how of building, of renovation, etc. So we could see here the Qasba of Al-Kef, a project to classify Qasba as a historical monument pending from 90s until 2021. So these delays create major problems for that historical context. Kef, as Nourchen mentioned, is famous for music and theater. As a music and theater institute, it's threatened with collapse. So this institute is threatened with collapse. Social issues, awakening of public awareness, lack of oriented enhancement programs involving youth. It's very important through workshops, as we've seen in some of the works presented, Jamila's team, for example, in Oman, urban belonging and comfort in relation to the living environment is also another important issue that these cities grapple with. I'll hand it over to my colleague, Asma, and I hope I'm not going over time. Asma, over to you. So let's see. Asma, can you hear me? I think we might be having a technical issue. I'll just double check.
Thank you, Majdi. Thank you, Dr. Gamal, for this unique opportunity to talk about the Northwest region and its potential and its probably problems that make it fragilize the region and heritage. Hence, urban development and local promotion of regions is not reflected as a strategic vision. The articulation of historical layers is no longer visible through neither an architectural heritage nor an urban layout that highlights all its components, and we can distinguish diachronic organization depending on eras and time frame. The new urban production mechanisms existing between the utilitarian dimension and almost absent control creates a weakened local identity. Urban governance stops at punctual interventions in the management of everyday life of both cities. In reality, for lack of the necessary budgets, current urban choices accentuate an inherent threat to the characteristic identity traits for the cities to be reflected as an oversight and ignorance from the public. So how can we be oriented into adapted territorial promotion? As people, we asked, consider that new and especially young people consider that new Northwest region is out of an adapted economic model with almost absent efforts to enhance the socio-economic situation and to preserve local identity, which is unique in Tunisia. And we must insist that the potential, the historical potential of the Northwest region is a typical along Tunisia heritage. So they recommend the necessity of a global vision by promoting culture and tourism economy. Already problems of governance and belonging are unveiled. So global strategic vision with orientations that target operating methods and choices. The choices concerns participatory work with more openness to residents, visitors, and professionals through a national consultation. It's time to go on with the national consultations to identify the new needs and the new choices to have to deal with. In addition to that, we have integration of all heritage sites of the region enhancing programs of presentation and support. For example, the site of the site of Kef is well known for, and even the site of Tabarka are well known as being some historical centers. However, there is many archaeological and many historical sites around that we have to integrate in touristic and cultural circuits. The next slide, Majdi, thank you. If Professor Michael Benson said yesterday as most important question is where are communities in the decision-making process, we must stress the fact on our question, are communities ready to review and to upgrade its heritage? And whose version of development have we to follow? That's the challenge. This includes two essential deals. The first one concerns, as we say, governance issues that need new recommendations. The second one is a social challenge to promote collective consciousness and hence how to reclaim our tangible heritage and to instigate our cultural and local know-how. How to improve and even requalify our heritage perception. This means we have to lead with a new opening on the stakeholders like ISM, like NGOs, like local citizen initiatives to promote our local heritage.
1 minute, please, Madam Asma Gharbi. Thank you.
I continue?
Yes,
please.
1 minute is left.
Debating possibilities of sustainable development through working on and with communities that are staying resilient in confrontation with modernity and innovation new deals make us in front of new challenges to promote the heritage perception. By working on our cities, we know that stakeholders' impact and participation is unfortunately limited. Unfortunately limited. For Tabarka, for example, only individual interventions are highly mobilized. Even with the presence of GZ, which is very important, it stays limited. People consider that officials' role is almost absent, except everyday management tasks of public lighting, building or trade authorization, etc. So thus, the global strategic vision is the most important recommendation that we approved by other actors questioned. This means that governance promoting is the new challenge we have to focus on. This can be sustained by enlarging patrimonial perimeter. Please, Majdi, you put the last vision, the previous diapositive slide. Yes, you put this. That means including all possible cultural sites near to historical centers, and we'll have many touristic circuits with all possible local repercussions, such as creation of economic and cultural dynamic. So the new types of tourism, like the alternative tourism, would improve regional and local attractiveness and competitiveness, and enrich the animation programs around this heritage. The regeneration of reception infrastructure and the enhancement of architecture and landscapes framework would improve and would make people more aware about the importance of this heritage. The next, yes. The need belonged in relation to a material image and a cultural image is the new and the most important also priority and recommendation. Sensitization is another challenge we recommend to improve with public awareness. In fact, the dominant heritage paradigm privileged firstly the highly visible and aesthetic overviews. The restoration project of the Jewish religious building is ready but blocked blocked, and this emblematic monument for the local population is threatened with ruin. Strengthening the local identity and its preservation requires additional efforts of commitment and tolerance. People need to feel highly belonging to their territory, and this may be really possible if we generate the identity landmarks, references, and value, and by updating ancient know-how, techniques, and habits. This will result in the promotion of a social and even regional economy. In conclusion, we want to insist on the fact that we need political will, social will, and also preservation of local know-how. As you can see, for example, there is many know-how that are fragilized, and people are forgetting its importance, like the pipe of Tabarka, the know-how inclusion. In the end, I want also to take should I conclude, Majdi?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Okay. In the end, I want to take time to thank Mr. Gamal for giving confiance, for the confiance given, and dear Majdi for this opportunity that will certainly establish new connections between North Africa and the English universities and experts. It is infrastructure that will include cultural foundation for either sharing or and belonging.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I will stop here. Thank you, Majdi.
Thank you very much, Asma. Okay, so thank you very much, Asma. Now we have our next presentation with Layla. So since Layla is presenting, I'll do a brief introduction. Layla Ben Qasim, who doesn't know Layla Ben Qasim in Tunis, is a social cultural opportunity designer, Shoka Fellow, and founder of Bluefish, a consultancy that improves socioeconomic dynamics of heritage and culture to improve its resilience. Layla also founded Dar Harka Creative Industry Hub, Dar Ben Qasim, a boutique hotel, and cultural catalyst in Medina of Tunis. I happen to know Layla through this project, and I wrote an article about it in 2009. So Layla will tell us about her experience in the Medina as an entrepreneur through her presentation, Tourism Beyond Economic Development, Heritage for Marginalized Communities. Layla, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for being here.